My wife cheated on me and gave birth to a black girl, so I walked out of the delivery room.
The moment of betrayal hit like a physical blow, sudden and unbearable. He had always trusted his wife, believing that the life they were building together was founded on honesty, love, and loyalty. That trust, however, came crashing down in the most unexpected and cruel way. There he was, in the delivery room, waiting to welcome the newest addition to their family, filled with a mixture of nervous anticipation and excitement. Every birth, every moment of labor, he had imagined as sacred, a testament to the life they had created together. Yet, as he looked at her, the woman he had loved and thought he knew completely, a gnawing suspicion in the back of his mind suddenly crystallized into a harsh, undeniable reality. The baby in her arms, so innocent and fragile, held the undeniable mark of infidelity. The features, the skin tone, the very presence of the child screamed a truth he had never wanted to confront, but now could not ignore. Shock rendered him momentarily speechless. His mind raced through a chaotic storm of memories, attempting to reconcile the woman he loved with the woman who had betrayed him. Every shared laugh, every intimate conversation, every moment of supposed trust was now tainted with the knowledge that she had lived a secret life, one that had produced a child outside of their marriage. It was as if the ground beneath him had vanished, leaving him suspended in a void of disbelief and pain. The room, with its sterile smell of antiseptic and the muffled cries of nurses, seemed suddenly alien, almost hostile, as though the very environment conspired to highlight the depth of his loss and humiliation. Anger began to bubble alongside the sorrow, a fiery, consuming sensation that he had never anticipated feeling in such a pure, visceral way. He felt betrayed not just as a husband but as a human being, as someone who had invested emotionally, mentally, and spiritually in a partnership that now felt like a lie. The knowledge that this child, an innocent life, pure and unknowing, was the product of deception, added a layer of bitter complexity to his pain. He was torn between rage at the betrayal and a shocking, involuntary sense of compassion for a being that had done nothing wrong yet symbolized the ultimate proof of deceit. Everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his life, and his future dissolved in that instant. The moments of joy he had anticipated, the vision of holding his newborn and celebrating the expansion of their family, vanished into a haze of grief and incredulity. He realized that this revelation was not something that could be processed in the quiet confines of his mind. It demanded a response, an action that would either define him or break him entirely. The emotional weight was unbearable, pressing down on his chest with relentless intensity, leaving him teetering between staying and confronting the betrayal or walking away from a situation that had become emotionally toxic in the span of a heartbeat. In that instant, he understood the irrevocable nature of the truth laid bare before him. There would be no turning back, no ability to ignore or rationalize the betrayal away. It was raw, undeniable, and life-changing. The shock, the disbelief, and the hurt intertwined to form a moment that would forever be etched in his memory. A turning point that marked the end of trust and the beginning of a path paved with difficult decisions, deep emotional scars, and the necessity of self-preservation. The intensity of his emotions surged in a way he had never experienced before, overwhelming him completely. In that delivery room, surrounded by the sterile smell of antiseptic, the soft hum of machines, and the muffled voices of nurses, his mind was a chaotic storm of anger, hurt, and disbelief. The sight of his wife holding the baby, the undeniable evidence of her betrayal, triggered an immediate, visceral response. It was as if every ounce of control he had over his emotions evaporated in an instant, leaving only raw, unfiltered pain. His body tensed, his heart pounded, and his mind raced in a frantic search for a way to process the unimaginable. He felt an almost primal need to escape, to remove himself from the scene that had become so unbearable, so charged with emotional devastation. His immediate reaction was not thought out, it was instinctual. He realized that remaining in that room could lead him to act in ways he would later regret. The emotions coursing through him were powerful enough to cloud judgment, to push him toward confrontation, shouting, or even physical aggression. The delivery room, which should have been a place of joy, hope, and new beginnings, had transformed into a battlefield of emotions where every glance, every sound, and every gesture from his wife felt like a reminder of the deception that had been inflicted upon him. He knew he had to step away before the storm inside him caused irreversible damage to the fragile environment and to himself. Walking out was not just a physical act. It was a symbolic one. It represented his refusal to participate in a scene that had been tainted by betrayal, a conscious effort to protect his sanity and maintain some semblance of dignity. Each step away from the room felt heavy, weighted by the gravity of the situation and the emotional explosion that had been triggered within him. He could feel the tightness in his chest, the lump in his throat, and the sting in his eyes, all manifestations of a heart breaking in real time. His mind oscillated between sorrow for the life he had lost, anger at the deception, and the complicated, almost guilt-laden feelings for the innocent child caught in the crossfire of adult mistakes. The act of leaving also served as a temporary refuge, a way to regain composure in the face of a betrayal too painful to confront head-on. Outside the room, he could breathe, let the reality of the situation settle in, and begin the painstaking process of thinking through what this meant for his future. The emotional intensity that had threatened to engulf him was still present, but at least now it had some space to be acknowledged, processed, and understood. He realized that the way he responded in that first critical moment would define not only his immediate interactions, but also the trajectory of his life moving forward. Walking out was a statement of self-preservation, an instinctive need to create distance from a situation so shocking that it threatened to consume him entirely. It was a moment that combined heartbreak with clarity, an acknowledgement that some truths are too heavy to face without first giving oneself the space to breathe, to absorb, and to survive emotionally. In choosing to step away, he demonstrated both the depth of his pain and the beginning of a path toward managing it, highlighting the complex interplay between raw emotion and conscious decision-making in the most devastating of personal crises. The moment he laid eyes on the child, he was struck not only by the shocking confirmation of his wife's betrayal, but also by the undeniable reality of the child's racial identity. The baby's skin tone and features were so distinct, so divergent from his own, that they left no room for doubt. It was an unexpected twist that added a complex layer of tension to an already heart-wrenching situation. This was not just about infidelity anymore. It was a confrontation with cultural, societal, and personal expectations that had long been ingrained in him. He realized that the child was an innocent, helpless being, yet its very existence was a symbol of deceit and a disruption of the life he had envisioned. In that instant, he felt the weight of social and cultural implications pressing down on him. The idea of raising a child who visibly represented a betrayal challenged everything he thought he knew about family, loyalty, and identity. He questioned how society would perceive this child and what it meant for his own sense of self and legacy. The racial difference, though superficial in essence, became a magnifier of the emotional intensity of the situation, making the betrayal feel even more stark and palpable. It was as if every expectation he had held about family and inheritance, about continuity and shared identity, had been shattered in one irrevocable moment. The complexity of the situation also forced him to confront his own biases and prejudices, whether he wanted to or not. He realized that part of his shock was rooted not only in the betrayal itself, but in the unexpected racial identity of the child, which challenged his sense of familiarity and control. This was an uncomfortable recognition, but an unavoidable one. It made the emotional turmoil more layered and multifaceted, intertwining personal hurt with broader questions about identity, belonging, and societal judgment. In that small, fragile being, he saw a mirror reflecting not only the infidelity, but also the cultural and emotional dissonance that now colored his reality. He also struggled with the moral and ethical implications of his reaction. The child had done nothing wrong. It was born into circumstances beyond its control, yet it had become the visible manifestation of his wife's deceit. This realization created a conflict within him. He had to separate his feelings of anger and betrayal toward his wife from his instinctive yet unjust frustration at the innocent child. The challenge of disentangling these emotions added a depth of psychological tension that was almost unbearable. Every glance at the baby reminded him of the infidelity, yet also evoked a flicker of compassion, a reluctant recognition of innocence amidst the chaos. Ultimately, the racial identity of the child transformed the situation from a personal betrayal into a broader emotional and cultural confrontation. It forced him to grapple with the intersection of love, trust, identity, and societal expectations in a way that was painful, disorienting, and profoundly human. This complexity magnified every other emotion he felt: anger, shock, sorrow, and confusion, making it clear that the path forward would not be simple. The child's existence was a permanent, undeniable reminder of the betrayal, one that would require him to navigate a maze of emotional, cultural, and moral challenges, reshaping the very foundation of his understanding of family, loyalty, and self. The discovery of his wife's betrayal did more than just shatter his trust. It completely upended the foundation of their relationship. In the span of a few minutes, the bond he had believed to be unbreakable crumbled under the weight of deceit and hidden truths. Every shared plan, every promise of loyalty, every vision of a future together suddenly seemed like an illusion carefully constructed to mask a life of duplicity. The realization that the woman he had devoted years of love, care, and commitment to had secretly pursued another relationship was devastating. It was as if the very core of his understanding of their marriage had been stripped away, leaving a hollow emptiness in its place. He felt the enormity of the betrayal not only in the act itself, but in the timing and context. It wasn't simply a past mistake being uncovered. It was a revelation made at the moment that should have been the happiest of his life. The birth of a child, a moment that typically symbolizes hope, continuity, and the strengthening of family ties, was instead transformed into a painful reminder of deceit. This juxtaposition amplified the emotional intensity of the situation, making it impossible for him to reconcile the joyous expectations of fatherhood with the harsh reality of being deceived by the person he loved most. The emotional rupture was profound, and he realized that some fissures, once formed, cannot be easily mended. As the shock settled, he began to process the implications for their relationship moving forward. Trust, the invisible glue that had held them together, had been irreparably damaged. The betrayal created a chasm that could not be bridged by apologies alone. He understood that even if she expressed remorse, the fundamental truth remained. She had violated the implicit contract of honesty, loyalty, and transparency that defined marriage. Every interaction, every memory, every shared experience was now tainted by doubt, leaving him questioning not just her actions but the authenticity of everything they had shared. The story of betrayal is never solely about the act. It is about the erosion of a bond built over time. He felt a profound sense of loss, mourning not only the immediate breach of trust, but the years of love and commitment that had been overshadowed by deception. There was also an acute awareness of the ripple effects of this break, on how it would affect his sense of identity, his emotional stability, and his perception of relationships in the future. A single act of infidelity had transformed into a complex web of emotional consequences, leaving him to navigate the aftermath with caution and introspection. Ultimately, the collapse of the relationship highlighted the fragility of trust and the deep emotional vulnerability inherent in love. It emphasized that betrayal is not merely an event. It is a transformative force that redefines relationships, reshapes personal boundaries, and forces a confrontation with painful realities. The breakdown of their marriage became a defining moment, a turning point where the protagonist had to acknowledge that love alone is insufficient to sustain a bond once honesty has been shattered. This realization, bitter as it was, laid the groundwork for the difficult decisions he would have to make, the protective measures he would have to enforce, and the emotional journey he would have to endure to reclaim his sense of self and stability. The decision to walk out of the delivery room was not just a reaction to shock. It was a conscious choice to assert control over a situation that had become emotionally overwhelming. In the midst of betrayal, anger, and hurt, he recognized that remaining in that room would trap him in a cycle of raw, destructive emotions. Every glance at his wife, every innocent movement of the baby, seemed to echo the deception he had just discovered. To stay would be to expose himself to a flood of feelings that could lead to regrettable actions, words spoken in fury, or a confrontation that would escalate the pain rather than provide clarity. Walking away, therefore, became a form of self-preservation, a deliberate act to protect his mental and emotional well-being at a moment when rational thought was almost impossible. The act itself carried profound symbolism. By stepping out, he was asserting that he would not be complicit in a situation tainted by betrayal. It was a refusal to normalize the presence of deceit in what should have been one of life's most sacred moments. In leaving, he created a physical and emotional distance, a buffer that allowed him to begin processing the enormity of what had occurred. This step was less about abandonment and more about survival. It was a recognition that before he could confront the consequences or make any decisions regarding the future, he needed to stabilize himself, even if only momentarily. As he moved away, the weight of responsibility intertwined with the intensity of his emotions. He was acutely aware that this decision, while necessary for his own mental health, did not negate the fact that a child had been born, an innocent life that now existed in the aftermath of deception. The tension between protecting oneself and acknowledging responsibility for the innocent parties involved created a complex emotional landscape. Walking out was both an act of self-respect and a strategic pause, a way to regain composure before facing conversations and decisions that would shape his life from that point onward. The consequences of his decision were immediate and far-reaching. It signaled to himself and to his wife that boundaries had been crossed, and that reconciliation or engagement could not occur until he had processed his emotions. It was a moment that marked a turning point, where anger, hurt, and betrayal were acknowledged and not suppressed. By choosing to leave, he took the first step in reclaiming agency over a life that had been shaken by deceit. The act of walking away demonstrated an understanding that emotional survival sometimes requires physical separation, even from situations that are unavoidable or profoundly significant. In essence, this choice represented the intersection of pain, clarity, and self-preservation. It highlighted the importance of emotional boundaries and the recognition that in moments of profound betrayal, taking space is not a sign of weakness, but a critical step toward understanding, healing, and eventual decision-making. Walking out of the delivery room was more than a response to infidelity. It was a conscious effort to regain control over a life suddenly upended, a commitment to protect his own emotional integrity, and a recognition that in the face of devastating betrayal, survival sometimes requires stepping away before facing the full weight of reality.